I never believed in fate. I always thought life was just a long list of choices and consequences. But the moment Cassie Morgan walked into my office last Tuesday afternoon, every belief I had about coincidence and timing suddenly felt wrong. I was sitting behind my desk staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. It was almost 2 in the afternoon, and my tie was hanging loose around my neck after a morning filled with non-stop calls. Most of my clients were angry couples who thought divorce should be as quick as ordering something online. They never understood why paperwork in courts took time. I was tired and honestly a little irritated. Then my paralegal Sarah knocked on the door. She pushed it open slightly and looked at me in a strange way. "Jake, there's someone here to see you," she said. "Do they have an appointment?" I asked without looking up from my computer. "No," she said, "it's urgent." I was about to tell Sarah to reschedule whoever it was. My day was already packed and I had zero energy left for surprises. But something about Sarah's expression made me pause. "All right," I said. "Send them in." I kept typing on my keyboard while the door opened behind me. I was halfway through writing an email when I heard a voice that made my entire body freeze. "Hi, Jake!" My fingers stopped moving. That voice, I knew it instantly. Even though I had not heard it in 8 years, I would have recognized it anywhere. Slowly, I lifted my eyes from the screen. Cassie Morgan was standing in the doorway. For a moment, it felt like time had folded in on itself. She looked almost exactly the same as she had back at the University of Wisconsin. Her dark blonde hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore a cream-colored sweater and jeans. Maybe there were small lines near her eyes now. Maybe a hint of tiredness in her expression. But it was still her. Still the girl who used to sit next to me in constitutional law. Still the girl who used to steal my pens during lectures and never give them back. Still the girl I had been deeply in love with for 2 straight years. "Cassie," I said quietly. My voice cracked a little, and I hated that she probably noticed. She gave me a small smile that carried a kind of sadness behind it. "Hey," she said. "Long time." "Yeah," I replied, standing up quickly. I almost knocked my coffee over while doing it. Some of it spilled onto a stack of documents, and I grabbed a napkin to wipe it. "Real professional," I muttered. Cassie stepped further into the office and closed the door gently behind her. "I know this is weird," she said. "Showing up like this after all these years." I shook my head slowly, still trying to process that she was actually standing there. "It's okay." "What's going on?" She took a breath and looked down at her hands. "Jake, I need your help." "All right. I need a lawyer." The word hit me harder than I expected. A lawyer. Suddenly things started to make sense. I leaned slightly against my desk. "What kind of help do you need?" Cassie swallowed before answering. "I'm getting divorced." The room felt strangely quiet after she said it. "Or at least I'm trying to," she continued softly. "My husband Trevor refuses to sign anything. He's fighting everything, and my current lawyer isn't helping at all." She glanced up at me again. "I saw online that you practice family law here in Madison. Your name came up and I remembered you." The fact that she had looked me up after all these years did something strange to my chest. "I know we haven't talked since graduation," she said quickly, "but I didn't know who else to trust." Trust. That word stayed in my mind. I cleared my throat and tried to sound professional. "Okay," I said. "Let's start from the beginning. How long were you married?" 7 years. 7 years. Which meant she had married him only months after college. Back when I was still trying to convince myself I was over her. She sat across from me and began explaining everything. The fights with Trevor. The arguments about money. The way he refused to cooperate with the divorce process. For nearly an hour she talked while I took notes. But if I was being honest with myself, part of my mind was somewhere else entirely. All I could think about was the fact that she was here again, right in front of me. When she finally finished speaking, she looked at me carefully. "So," she said softly, "will you take my case?" Every logical part of my brain told me this was a terrible idea. Representing the woman I had once loved was already complicated. Representing the woman I had never actually stopped loving was something else entirely. "Yes," I heard myself say, "I'll help you." Cassie's entire face lit up with relief. "Thank you," she said, reaching across the desk and taking my hand. Her touch felt warm and familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. "Jake, seriously, thank you." I nodded slowly. "We'll figure this out." What I did not tell her was that I had been trying to figure her out for 8 years and still had not succeeded. What I did not tell her was that seeing her again felt like someone had suddenly turned the lights back on in a room that had been dark for a very long time. And what I definitely did not tell her was that agreeing to help her might be the most dangerous decision I had made in my life. Because the moment Cassie Morgan walked back into my world, I knew one thing for sure. Nothing about my life was going to stay simple anymore. 3 days later, we met again, but this time it was not at my office. Cassie had suggested a small coffee shop downtown. She said it felt less formal, and honestly, I did not argue. Sitting across from her in my office had already been difficult enough. I arrived 15 minutes early. I told myself it was because lawyers should always be prepared. But the truth was simpler. I wanted to see her. The place smelled like roasted coffee beans and warm bread. I ordered a black coffee and sat at a corner table near the window. I opened my laptop and pretended to review case notes, but my eyes kept drifting toward the door. Every time someone walked in, my heart jumped for a second. Then finally she appeared. Cassie stepped inside, wearing a dark green jacket that made her eyes look brighter than I remembered. Her hair was down this time, resting softly on her shoulders. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. She spotted me and smiled. "Hey," she said as she walked over. "Hey," I replied, standing quickly. "Sorry if I'm late." "You're actually right on time," I said. "I just got here early." She laughed softly. "You always got everywhere early. I remember that about you." The fact that she remembered something that small about me made my chest feel strangely warm. She sat across from me and ordered a latte from the server. When it arrived, we got straight to work. At least that was the plan. We spent the first 20 minutes going through the details of her case. Property division, financial records, Trevor's refusal to cooperate, and the next legal steps we needed to take. I asked questions and wrote notes while she answered carefully. For a while, it felt like a normal meeting between a lawyer and a client. Then her phone rang. Cassie glanced at the screen and her whole expression changed. Her shoulders stiffened and the warmth left her eyes. "It's Trevor," she said quietly. "Do you need to answer it?" I asked. She shook her head and declined the call. "He's been calling constantly," she explained. "Sometimes 20 times a day." "That sounds like harassment," I said. "I know," she replied, "but he's not dangerous. He's just angry." Her phone buzzed again, another call. She declined that one too. Cassie looked down at the table and sighed. "Why do I still make excuses for him?" she said quietly. I leaned back slightly in my chair. "Because you spent 7 years with him," I said. "You can't just turn those feelings off overnight." She looked up at me then. Not just a quick glance. She really looked at me. "You always understood me," she said softly, "even back in school." I did not know what to say to that. The conversation slowly shifted after that. We stopped talking about divorce documents and legal strategy. Instead, we started talking the way we used to years ago. Cassie told me about her work as a graphic designer. She worked mostly from home now, creating logos and brand designs for different companies. I told her about my law practice and my small apartment overlooking the Capitol building. We talked about old college memories, about the professors we liked and the classes we hated, about the stupid arguments our friends used to have at 2 in the morning. 2 hours passed before either of us noticed. When we finally stepped outside, the sky had turned dark and the streetlights had come on. We stood on the sidewalk near her car. Neither of us seemed ready to leave. "Thank you for today," Cassie said. "You mean the legal advice?" She shook her head slightly. "No, I mean for listening." I smiled. "Anytime." She stepped a little closer. "Same time next week?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'll start drafting a response to Trevor's lawyer before then." "Good." She turned toward her car but stopped after a few steps. "Hey, Jake." "Yeah? I'm really glad I found you again." The way she said it made something shift inside me. "Me too," I said honestly. She smiled once more, and then got into her car. I stood there watching her drive away like an idiot with a stupid grin on my face. The truth was simple. I was already in trouble, and the next few weeks proved it. Cassie and I kept meeting at that same coffee shop. Yes, we worked on her case. I made sure the paperwork moved forward and handled communication with Trevor's lawyer. But we also talked about everything else. Every meeting lasted longer than it should have. Every goodbye felt a little harder. Then one Tuesday, everything changed. Cassie arrived looking different. Her eyes were red and swollen like she had been crying. She sat down across from me and wrapped both hands around her latte but did not drink it. "What happened?" I asked. She took a shaky breath. "Trevor came to my apartment last night." My stomach tightened. "Was he drunk?" She nodded. "He was banging on the door and yelling, saying I was ruining his life." She pulled her arms closer around herself. "My neighbor almost called the police." Anger rose inside my chest. "That's not okay," I said firmly. "We're filing for a restraining order today." Quote. Cassie shook her head quickly. "I don't know if that's necessary." "He showed up drunk and scared you," I replied. "That is exactly what restraining orders are for." Without thinking, I reached across the table and took her hand. She looked down at our hands, but did not pull away. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for caring about what happens to me." "Of course I care," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. I never stopped caring. Silence settled between us, heavy and impossible to ignore. Cassie looked at me carefully. "Jake," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why didn't you ever tell me back in school?" My heart skipped. "Tell you what?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Don't pretend," she said gently. "Sarah told me." My stomach dropped. "Your old roommate Sarah," she continued. "We ran into each other at a wedding 2 years ago. She had a little too much wine and told me everything." I stared at her. "She told you that I was in love with you?" Cassie nodded slowly. She did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she looked straight into my eyes. "So I'm asking you now," she said quietly. "Were you in love with me back then?" For a moment I could not speak. The question sat between us like something fragile that could break if either of us moved too quickly. Cassie watched me carefully. Her green eyes were searching my face, waiting for the truth. I could lie. I could laugh it off and change the subject. That would have been the smart thing to do. But I had spent 8 years pretending. I was tired of pretending. "Yes," I said quietly, "I was completely in love with you." Cassie inhaled sharply. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. I ran my hand through my hair and looked down at the table for a second. "Because you were with Trevor," I said. "You looked happy. I didn't want to ruin your relationship." She shook her head slowly. "I wasn't happy, Jake." Her voice cracked slightly. "I thought I was supposed to be. Everyone said Trevor was a good guy, stable, safe. I kept telling myself that love would grow eventually." Tears started forming in her eyes. "But it never did." Quote. Hearing that hurt more than I expected. I reached across the table again, gently taking her hand. Cassie did not pull away. "I think part of me always knew how you felt," she continued quietly, "even if you never said it out loud." She looked down at our hands. "And that scared me." "Scared you?" I asked. She nodded. "You made me feel things I didn't understand back then. When we studied together, when we talked for hours, when you looked at me the way you did." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I was afraid of how strong those feelings were. I swallowed slowly. "So you married Trevor instead?" Cassie gave a small, sad smile. "I married the safe choice." That sentence stayed in my head for a long moment. Then she looked back up at me. "When Sarah told me the truth 2 years ago, I went home and cried all night," she said, "because I realized I might have made the biggest mistake of my life." My chest tightened. "Cassie." "I would lie in bed next to my husband and think about you," she admitted. "About what would have happened if we had just been honest with each other." The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too crowded. "Let's go somewhere else," I said quietly. She nodded. We left the coffee shop and drove across town. The sky had turned gray and light rain was falling over Madison. I drove us to Warner Park. It was one of my favorite quiet places. A small path led to a bench that overlooked the lake. Usually only a few people came there. Today it was empty. The rain had stopped by the time we arrived, leaving the air cool and fresh. We sat on the bench under a large oak tree. For a while, neither of us spoke. The lake was calm, and the clouds slowly started breaking apart above us. Finally, Cassie turned toward me. "I didn't come looking for this," she said softly. "I know. I came because I needed a lawyer, because my marriage was falling apart and I was desperate." She paused before continuing. "But when I saw you again, everything came back." Her hand moved slowly until it rested on mine. "Jake, I had feelings for you back then too." Quote. My heart started pounding. "You did?" She nodded. "I just didn't know what to do with them. You were my best friend. You understood me better than anyone else." Her voice became quieter. "And that terrified me." "Why?" "Because it felt too real." She took a slow breath. "Trevor was easy. Trevor didn't challenge me. Being with you felt like standing on the edge of something huge and unknown." Her fingers tightened around my hand. I ran from it. The honesty in her voice made my chest ache. "Cassie," I said carefully, "you're going through a divorce. Your emotions are everywhere right now. We should probably slow down." "I don't want to slow down," she said immediately. She turned her body slightly so she was facing me completely. "I've spent 8 years pretending my feelings didn't exist." Her eyes filled with tears again. "I'm tired of pretending." The wind moved softly through the trees above us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she leaned closer. "Jake," she whispered. "Yeah, I want you." My brain tried to warn me. Every logical part of me screamed that this was a terrible idea. She was still married. I had been her lawyer. The timing was completely wrong. But logic stopped mattering the moment her lips touched mine. The kiss was soft at first, gentle and uncertain. Then it deepened. Her hands slid into my hair while my arms wrapped around her waist. It felt like 8 years of silence breaking all at once. Like something we had both been holding back for far too long. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. Cassie rested her forehead against mine. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Completely insane." I agreed. She laughed softly through her tears. "Your professional ethics board would probably hate this." "They definitely would." "We should probably stop." "Probably." Neither of us moved. Finally, I sighed and leaned back slightly. "There's something we need to do first," I said. "What?" "I can't be your lawyer anymore." She blinked. "What?" "I mean it," I said. "If we're going to explore whatever this is between us, I can't represent you. It's not ethical." Quote. Cassie studied my face for a moment. "So what happens now?" "I refer your case to someone else. My friend Marcus is one of the best divorce lawyers in the city. He'll handle everything from here." "And you?" I looked at her. "I'll just be Jake." She smiled slightly. "I like that option better anyway." We sat quietly for a moment. Then she squeezed my hand. "So if you're not my lawyer anymore," she said softly, "what are we?" I thought about that question carefully. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I know I don't want to lose you again." Cassie leaned closer and kissed me once more. This time the kiss was slower, warmer, like a promise. When she pulled away, she smiled gently. "Then maybe we should start figuring it out." I nodded slowly. "Yeah." But as I looked at her sitting beside me under that oak tree, one thought kept repeating in my mind. After 8 years of silence and missed chances, we had finally told each other the truth. Now the real question was whether the truth had come too late. After that day at the lake, everything changed. Marcus agreed to take Cassie's case without asking too many questions. He knew me well enough to understand that something complicated was happening. All he said was that he would handle the legal battle and I should stay far away from the paperwork. So I did. Cassie and I still met, but now it was different. No legal files on the table. No conversations about court deadlines or settlement documents. Just the two of us. At first, we kept things simple. Coffee dates turned into long walks through downtown Madison. Sometimes we would grab dinner at small restaurants by the lake. Other nights, we would just sit in my apartment and talk about everything we had missed during those 8 years. There was a strange comfort between us. It felt like we had known each other forever, yet at the same time we were discovering each other all over again. Cassie slowly started to change too. The tired look she had the first day she walked into my office began to disappear. Her smile became easier. Her laughter became louder. One night, while we were walking along the lake, she looked at me and said something I would never forget. "You know what the strangest part of all this is?" Quote, "What?" I asked. "I feel like I can breathe again." I squeezed her hand gently. "You deserve that." The divorce process was not easy, though. Trevor fought hard during the first few weeks. Marcus told me he argued over everything. Property, money, even small personal items. But Cassie stayed strong. She never backed down. And slowly, piece by piece, Trevor realized she was serious about leaving. 4 months later, the final hearing arrived. Cassie called me that morning. "It's today," she said. "Do you want me there?" I asked. She was quiet for a second. "No," she said softly, "but I want to see you after." So I waited. I spent most of that morning pacing around my apartment, checking my phone every 10 minutes like a nervous teenager. Finally, around noon, my phone rang. "It's done," Cassie said. Her voice sounded lighter than I had ever heard it. "It's really over." "I'm proud of you," I told her. "Meet me outside the courthouse?" "I'm already on my way." When I pulled up outside the courthouse, she was standing near the steps. Cassie was wearing a simple blue dress, and the sunlight reflected softly in her hair. She looked peaceful. Truly peaceful. The moment she saw my car, she smiled and walked over quickly. She opened the passenger door and climbed inside. "It's official," she said, letting out a long breath. "I'm free." "How does it feel?" I asked. She leaned over and kissed me, like a new beginning. For a moment, we just sat there smiling at each other. Then I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small box. "I got you something," I said. Cassie raised an eyebrow. "Jake, what is this?" Quote, "Open it." She carefully lifted the lid. Inside was a silver bracelet with a tiny charm shaped like a pen. Cassie stared at it for a second before laughing through sudden tears. "A pen? You used to steal mine in law school," I reminded her. "You never gave any of them back." She wiped her eyes and shook her head. "You are such a dork." "But you like it." Quote, "I love it." She carefully placed the bracelet on her wrist and admired it. Then she looked at me again. "I love you." The words were soft but clear. For a moment, my heart stopped. It was the first time either of us had said it out loud. "I love you too," I said. "I've loved you for 8 years." Cassie smiled gently. "That's a long time." "Not long enough," I replied. She reached across the center console and took my hand. "So what happens now?" she asked. I started the car slowly. "Well," I said, "I was thinking we could celebrate." "How?" "We grab lunch, then maybe walk by the lake. After that, we can go back to the coffee shop where this whole crazy story started." Cassie laughed softly. "That sounds perfect." "And after that," I continued, "we do something we probably should have done 8 years ago." "What's that?" "We stop running." She squeezed my hand. "I like that plan." As we drove away from the courthouse, the city moved around us like any normal day. People walking down the sidewalks, cars passing by, the quiet rhythm of everyday life. But for me, everything felt different. For years, I had believed that I had lost my chance with Cassie, that life had simply moved on without us. Maybe we had taken the long road. Maybe we had needed those years apart to learn who we were and what we really wanted. Or maybe we had both just been scared. Either way, none of that mattered anymore. Cassie looked over at me and smiled. "Hey, Jake." "Yeah?" "Thank you for waiting for me." I squeezed her hand a little tighter. "Always. Because some people are worth waiting for. Some people are worth 8 years. Some people are worth a lifetime. And Cassie Morgan had always been worth every second.